I'm standing here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, near the Gettysburg National Military Park, the ground where two of the most important events in American history took place: the Battle of Gettysburg and Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. From July 1st through July 3rd in 1863, the Gettysburg battlefield was where Union forces finally broke the momentum of General Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army and stopped his invasion of the North. Militarily, Gettysburg was the Confederacy's best and last real chance to win big in the Civil War, and their eventual defeat here kept the United States from being split in two. On November 19th of that same year, on this same ground, Lincoln returned to dedicate a cemetery where the many thousands who died in that battle were laid to rest. Instead of a long speech, he gave a brief 2-minute reflection that helped save the Union in another way, by giving a deeper meaning to the war and to the nation itself. In just 272 words, the Gettysburg Address did indeed honor the fallen. But Lincoln also did something more. He took the moment to redefine the Civil War as a great test of whether this nation could survive, be purified, and experience what he called a new birth of freedom. He was not simply trying to keep the country together for political reasons. Rather, he truly believed the United States was a test case for whether democracy itself could endure. If it broke apart, it might suggest that self-government cannot work. If it endured, it would show that a nation built on freedom and equality can last. What frames the speech and gives it its ultimate meaning is a short phrase we tend to easily miss: under God. Lincoln used those two words near the end of his talk when he said that this nation under God shall experience a new birth of freedom. His grammatical use of under God is important because it modifies the word nation and tells us what kind of nation the United States is. That it is a nation that exists, like every nation, under God's authority and, in a more specific sense, under God's providence. Interestingly, under God does not appear in Lincoln's pre-delivery drafts. Evidence suggests he added it on the spot. In that moment, he seemed compelled to make clear that the entire experiment of the United States lives and acts under God's sovereign rule. By placing the nation explicitly under a higher moral authority, Lincoln subtly shifted the meaning of the conflict. The Union's cause was no longer just about power, territory, or even national survival. It was about whether this people, who professed that all men are created equal, would stand as faithful to that truth before the God who is Lord of history, who judges nations, and who mysteriously guides all things, including those events marred by evil and suffering, to their proper good. Seen this way, under God names the horizon of divine providence within which a government of the people, by the people, for the people will either perish from the earth or be, in some measure, reborn and reordered to a greater good. So at a moment when the Union was fragile and its future uncertain, Lincoln asked Americans to see their story from God's perspective, to read their history, their sins, their sacrifices, and their hopes as part of a plan greater than themselves. He called them back to their beginnings, to the Declaration of Independence and the founding ideas, and asked them to move forward in the light of those truths, but to do so with a sense of being, as a nation, under God's authority, under God's judgment, under God's mercy, under God's providence. It was Lincoln's growing faith, especially in the providence of God, that allowed him to see the Civil War from this perspective and so situate the story of the United States as being a part of a larger divine drama which was unfolding beneath the sovereign hand of a just and merciful God. I present this reflection on Lincoln's Gettysburg Address because, as the United States celebrates her 250th birthday, I want to invite you to reflect more deeply on the true origins of this nation. I want to invite you to go back to our beginnings, back to our foundations on which our country was actually built, not focusing merely on the political events of 1776, but, similarly to Lincoln, on the spiritual and providential forces that not only formed our union, but also prepared this land long before we declared independence from England. In this light, we can ask questions like these. How has God been at work in the story of this land? What if the same divine providence Lincoln trusted during the Civil War was already at work centuries earlier, long before the war, long before the signing of the Declaration of Independence, guiding the very discovery and settlement of the New World? What if that providence worked through people of other nations in the exploration and colonization of the Americas? What if it was part of God's plan that many of those people were members of the Catholic Church? What if divine providence chose to work in a special way through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus, to influence the evangelization of the entire American continent? And what if that same providence gave the Virgin Mary an influential role in the founding and expansion of what would become the United States of America? What would that mean for how we understand ourselves and our origins as a nation? Over the next few weeks, we're going to allow these questions to inspire a look at a hidden but beautiful dimension of American history. That is the profound and oftentimes hidden influence the Blessed Virgin Mary has had on the discovery, evangelization, and settlement of the land that has become the United States, and how that influence contributed to the eventual founding and expansion of our nation. We will do this by following the three great European streams of Catholic and Marian influence that helped to discover and establish life in the New World. Each story is distinct, with its own saints and sinners, yet together they show how a Marian thread has been woven in the tapestry of our great country. Long before there was a United States, the cross was planted on this soil. Long before the Stars and Stripes flew over these fields, missionaries and settlers from Catholic nations were praying the rosary, celebrating Marian feast, and entrusting this land and its peoples to the care of the Mother of God. In other words, if we truly want to understand how this nation grew under God, we must also tell the story of how it grew under Mary's mantle. Now, most of us have never heard that story in school. When we think of the founding of our country, we picture Protestant England, Quaker Pennsylvania, and Virginia planters. When we think of expansion, we pictured covered wagons, pioneers, and the frontier. All of that is real and important, but it is not the whole truth. Standing here, where Lincoln expressed a hope that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, we can hear an invitation. If we desire that new birth of freedom today, if we want healing of our division and greater fidelity to the truth that all are created equal, we must look honestly at where we came from under God. That means telling the full story, not only the Protestant and Enlightenment roots that we know well, but also the Catholic and Marian roots we have largely forgotten. In the episodes that follow, we will look more closely at the English, Spanish, and French Catholic stories and ask, how did devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary shape the Catholic Church in this land through them? And how did that same church, through her children and her missions, quietly shaped the United States, whose union Lincoln fought to preserve. My hope is that, by the end, we will see our country's history with clearer eyes, more grateful for the many ways God has been at work here, more honest about our failures to live up to the light we have been given, and more ready, under God and under Mary's patronage, to seek our new birth of freedom in our time.